Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. As always, I'm your host, Jacob Panisi, and today I want to talk about one of the more popular topics of discussion with regards to training for motocross, and that is cycling. Let's get into it. So, if you've been in the world of motocross for the last few years, you've more than likely seen the emergence of cycling as one of the most popular forms of sort of cross training. So today, I just kind of wanted to start by talking about the different forms of cycling, mainly two. There's two that I really go in depth here, and I'll lay out some pros and cons for you. And my main goal is that by the end of the podcast, I want you to be able to make your own informed decision when it comes to which form is right for you, or if you should even include it in your program to begin with. So, when it comes to cycling, the most popular choices for motocross athletes tend to be either road cycling or cross-country mountain biking. Now, I want to take just a minute to make sure we're all on the same page here. Cross-country mountain biking is the kind of mountain biking where you're navigating through rough terrain, trails, going through obstacles, hill climbs, jumps, and so on. I don't mean downhill mountain biking, where you take kind of a ski lift to the top and ride down. Now, that's still a really good form of exercise, but that's not necessarily what I wanted to talk about today in the podcast. All right, so let's just go ahead and dig into road cycling. The pros of road cycling are, number one, it's very controllable, right? You can manipulate your heart rate into whichever zone you want to because you have multiple variables that you can control. For instance, depending on the bike you ride, it's possible to have between 1 and 30 gearing options, giving you the ability to perfectly manipulate the resistance of the pedals to match the workload you're looking to perform, right? So what exactly do I mean by that? For instance, if you're keeping a steady pace on flat ground and you're approaching a hill, if you stay in that same gear you're in on the flat ground, it'll become much more difficult to push the pedals as you begin climbing the hill. That makes sense, right? This is where the different gear combinations come in. You can shift down to make the pedals easier to push, allowing you to keep the same RPM and overall effort level, even though you're on a steep incline. You definitely won't be going as fast as you were on the flat ground, but you'll be putting out the same effort. And by controlling the effort level, it allows us to be very specific with where our heart rate is. Okay? If we want to increase our heart rate, we can increase the speed at which we're pedaling, as well as go to a taller gear as a way to increase the resistance of each pedal revolution. So it's very controllable. You can pick a heart rate zone and pretty easily maintain that zone no problem because of how easily you can change your pedaling cadence and your resistance or the gears. And another obvious pro about road cycling is it's very low impact on your joints. As long as you take the time to set up your bike for you specifically and you're really disciplined about maintaining good posture, you really can cycle for a long time without the risk of developing any sort of chronic issues, right? Because of this, we're much less limited on the volume of work that we can perform in one exercise bout. All right, let me give you an example. Let's say we want to get in 1 hour of zone 2 cardio. And for those of you who aren't necessarily familiar with cardio zones, quick summary, zone 2 cardio would roughly be somewhere between 60 to 70% of your maximum heart rate, right? The primary goal of zone 2 is endurance training. So we're training your body's ability to push at a moderate intensity for a long period of time. So knowing that, if we wanted to get in an hour of zone 2 cardio, this would be pretty difficult for us to do in the form of something like running, right? Unless you're an experienced and quite honestly a frequent runner, running is just a little too high impact for the body to be able to sustain that level of output for that length of time, right? Especially for any individuals who already have chronic knee or ankle problems. However, Since cycling is generally so low impact, almost anyone can jump straight into that volume as long as they understand how to properly pace themselves for a zone 2 cardio session. This allows us to utilize those much longer cardio sessions that we need to build our aerobic base and even to use as recovery cardio sessions. And another pro is that road cycling, quite honestly, is just more fun than sitting on a stationary bike or running on a treadmill, right? You can cover some pretty good distance on the road bike. So if you find an area that has really cool scenery or some pretty fun curves in the road, or even, if you're in a group of riders all keeping a tight formation and you almost kind of make a little more of a competition out of it, it can be super fun. And not to mention, it's also kind of nice to keep it to something on two wheels, right? Riding bikes can be a lot of fun, so who wouldn't want to ride a bike for a workout? I know I certainly would. All right, so what about the cons? Road cycling is putting almost all the load only on the legs. Now, I realize that the key to riding is using your legs and the majority of the control and endurance load is on the lower body, but that being said, your upper body is also in constant use and gets just as fatigued as your lower body. So wouldn't it make sense to train both the upper body and the lower body? It's also just not very dynamic. Your body positioning doesn't really change much unless you stand up for a sprint. You don't really have to shift your weight or navigate through any obstacles, right? It's all pretty controlled and constant for longer periods of time. And something like that, you'll never see on a dirt bike. And for me, not just for me, for everybody, the last con is that it can be kind of dangerous, right? We live in a world where there are so many distracted drivers. You have to really be on your A game when it comes to being aware of your surroundings. All it takes in a split second is one blind corner and one distracted driver. Next thing you know, you're in the hospital or worse. So make sure you always ride with a partner if possible. This is absolutely one of those times where there is strength and safety in numbers. And please take the proper safety precautions, such as wearing all the right gear, helmets, reflectors, abiding by the rules of the road, constantly checking your surroundings, and communicate with those around you, right? So on and so forth. Be safe out there. All right, so this brings us to cross-country mountain biking. Cross-country mountain biking is pretty similar to road biking, but it's normally on rougher terrain, often with hills, rocks, tree roots, many other obstacles that add challenge to your path, right? And as far as pros for mountain biking, a lot of them are actually the same as road biking, meaning, it's highly controllable, lots of fun, so on and so forth, but there are a few benefits that are specific just to mountain biking. And the main one is that mountain biking is highly dynamic and challenging. You're constantly having to transition from sitting to standing in order to navigate over rocks, roots, or, you're changing your body positioning and your gearing as you're trying to make a hill climb, only to stand up and coast back down a steep hill, absorbing bumps, hitting jumps, trying to wheelie over certain obstacles and pick the best line. It becomes really highly reactive and intense, just like the sport of motocross. And if you need any evidence that this form of cross-training works, look no further than Eli Tomac. This is one of his favorite modalities of cross-training, and we all know how fit and strong Eli Tomac is. So another pro is the upper body is much more involved, right? Every time you transition from sitting to standing in anticipation for that upcoming patch of gnarly terrain, your body positioning and mechanics mimic that of your riding position on a dirt bike. There's way more turning, pulling up for jumps, or trying to wheelie over obstacles, all of which tend to utilize a lot of upper body strength. So what about the cons, right? What are the cons of mountain biking? Well, one of the main cons is that it's highly location-based. And what I mean by that is if you don't have a park or a recreational area that has a nice stretch of trails that you can ride through, you're kind of out of luck. It's also not as ideal for steady-state cardio as road biking is. Mountain biking trails are often much more dynamic and challenging than, a long stretch of road, so it's much more difficult to stay within certain cardio zones as you're kind of at the mercy of the terrain. And just like road biking, mountain biking can also be really dangerous. All it takes is losing the front end or smoking a tree, and you can end up injured just like that. So let's recap on both forms of cycling real quick before we move on. Road cycling is perfect for manipulating your heart rate to specific zones. It's really low impact on your joints, and to be honest, it's just a lot of fun. However, it mostly utilizes your lower body, and it's not the most dynamic form of cardio you can do, and it can definitely be dangerous if you're not aware of what's going on around you. Mountain biking, on the other hand, is also highly dynamic and challenging. It gets a lot more of your upper body involved and forces you to constantly change your body positioning to mimic that of motocross. That being said, it's pretty location-based. You can't manipulate your heart rate as precisely as you can with road biking, and it can also be really dangerous if you're not careful. Here we go. The bottom line, which one is better? And the answer is, neither is better. They're just different, and there's absolutely room for all when it comes to your cross training, right? As we outlined before, they both have specific pros and cons. So in order to cover all your bases, you should really try to hit both. It also comes down to personal preference, and above all else, whichever one you're going to enjoy more and adhere to consistently, that's what you should be doing. And also, just as a general rule of thumb, and to be honest, this applies for all cardio, not just cycling, don't limit yourself. Every kind of cross training brings a different kind of benefit. I personally love to run. I'm a huge runner. I believe that running is really, really good for you. However, I also realize that not everyone loves to run like me. So I like to make compromises with our athletes. Some days we road bike, some days we run, other days we kayak or bang out some meters on the ski erg. We try to change it up constantly to keep things fresh and fun, and I think you should do the same. So the last thing that I wanted to talk about today is a question that I get asked quite often, and that's, why do I think cycling is so prevalent in today's society? You know, what caused this emergence of cycling being so popular? And in my opinion, I think most of the reason cycling is so prevalent in today's motocross society is pretty much mostly chalked up to Aldon Baker. His background is in cycling. He was a professional cross-country mountain biker before he came to the States. And really, you don't push to become a professional in something unless you understand it thoroughly and you're good at it or you enjoy it. So, of course, when he takes on his first motocross athlete, which I'm sure most of you know, this happened to be Ricky Carmichael, the GOAT, of course he's going to be prescribing cycling because that's what he knows best. That's what he loves to do, and he understands how to achieve goals through that specific modality. And then we all know what happens next, right? He makes this impressive run of working with James Stewart after he left Ricky, when Ricky parted ways with him, and then he pairs up with Ryan Villopoto, Ken Roczen, and then Ryan Dungey after them, you know, Jason Anderson, Zach Osborne, now currently with Cooper Webb. That's a lot of champions that are all posting on social media about how much they cycle and how much they love it, right? So, of course, this is going to create a perception in the public eye that if you want to be a champion, road cycling is what works. And please don't take this like this isn't me knocking them at all. I have nothing but great respect for Aldon and all of his athletes. He was one of my role models going through college. And to be honest, he's the reason I pushed so hard to be doing what I'm doing today. However, I do know that his program's not for everyone, and it's absolutely not the only way to do things. Take Ken Roczen, for example. Ken had zero interest in spending that many hours on the bicycle each week, and he's one of the first and only athletes to willingly part ways with Baker because it just wasn't a good fit. And we all know how well Ken has performed since. Definitely not subpar. And we also have a couple riders who came back to MTF from the Baker's factory where they worked with Tyler Rattray, who basically is an extension of Baker, and they're just as, if not more fit and healthy than ever. So ultimately, all that matters is what works for you. Just like how there's more than one way to skin a cat, there's more than one way to prepare for a Supercross or Motocross championship. All right, that'll do it for today's episode. I hope you guys heard something that brought you a little bit of value today. And if you enjoyed the podcast and want more content like this, please don't forget to subscribe. And please share this episode with one person. I'm challenging you to share it with one person that you think could benefit from this information. Also, feel free to send me a DM on Instagram. My handle is Jacob_Panisi. That is JACOB_. PENNISI on Instagram. Send me a DM, check out the other content, and let me know what else I can do to provide you guys with as much value as possible. I'll see you guys next time.